So, after the discussion on the meaning of exchange rate and how the exchange rates are quoted, now in this session we can discuss about the how the exchange rates are determined. How the exchange rates are determined, what are those factors which affect the exchange rate, and why there is a fluctuations or there is a change we observe in the exchange rate. So, this is what basically the discussion what we can make in this particular session. All of you know that the exchange rate is always is very much fluctuating. The currency value against another currency is changing in a continuous manner. Sometimes the value is increasing, sometimes the value is decreasing. So, if the currency value is declining, we are telling that it is depreciating. Whenever the currency value is increasing, we are telling that this particular value against this currency value against another currency is appreciating. So, this is the common language always we use to define the change of the exchange rate in the different periods and different time. But the question here is that whenever you talk about this, that there is another concept is related to this, that is called the devaluation. You might have heard about this word, that is called the devaluation. We are telling that whenever the value is declining, we call it that there is a depreciation which is happening for that particular currency with respect to another currency, and the value is increasing, we are telling that there is appreciation which is happening with respect to another currency. But then what is devaluation? Is it same with depreciation, or is it different from the depreciation? So, that is basically another question always comes to the mind to the reader. You see, the meaning is same. Whenever the value is depreciating or value is declining, we call it is a depreciation or the value is depreciating. And another thing is the devaluation. What do we mean by this? You see, the depreciation is a process which is basically done by the market forces. Depreciation is always occurring due to the changes or the fluctuations of the market forces. But whenever we talk about the devaluation, devaluation is a policy measure which intentionally always done by the government or the regulator. The devaluation is man made or made by the individuals, made by the regulatory bodies, made by the government. But whenever we talk about the depreciation, depreciation is a market determined factor, market determined process, and if there is some kind of fluctuations happens with respect to the factors which are affecting the exchange rate, then there is a possibility of the depreciation. But devaluation is always done by the regulatory body or by the government intentionally to increase this performance of the export for that particular country, or there must be some economic reasons behind the devaluation. But depreciation is determined by the market forces. So, that is the basic difference between the devaluation and depreciation. Devaluation is a market mechanism, but depreciation is a market mechanism, but devaluation is not a market mechanism. It is done by the regulatory body or the government. So, whatever it may be, whether the currency is going to be depreciated or currency we are thinking about the depreciation or appreciation, how it basically measured. When we say that the particular value is currency value against another currency is depreciating or appreciating, then we calculate the change, the price of that particular or change in the exchange rate of that particular currency with respect to another currency. So, let S t is the exchange rate in a time period t, S t minus 1 is the exchange rate at the time t minus 1. then if you calculate the percentage change, then we can say that is basically the that particular value, let that is basically delta, the change. The change basically tell you whether the currency is depreciating against another currency or appreciating against another currency. So, the positive percentage change, if you see the delta, if you for example, percentage, the positive percentage change represent appreciation of the foreign currency, while a negative change represents the depreciation of the foreign currency. So, that is the way the appreciation and depreciation. For example, the rupee versus dollar was 72 rupees yesterday, then it has become 74 today. Then if you are calculating this change today, then it is 74 minus 72 divided by 72, then obviously it is positive, the delta value is positive. So, if it is positive, that means the foreign currency is appreciating, it is not home currency it is appreciating, the foreign currency is appreciating, because the value of the home currency is declining. The foreign home currency is depreciating and foreign currency is appreciating. But for example, it was 72, then it becomes 70, then it will be 70 minus 72 divided by 72, then by default it will be negative. That means, the home currency is appreciating, but the foreign currency is depreciating. So, in that context, if your reference point is foreign currency, then you can use this, but if your reference point is the home currency, then your interpretation should be reverse, should be opposite. So, that is the way the exchange rate movements are represented in the market or in the system. So, let us see that how this particular, what are those factors which are responsible for this movement. The particular factors, whenever we talk about, there are many factors which are basically affect this exchange rate. So, already as other factors always we think we discuss or we determine in the context of the different markets. Here also the exchange rate is again determined by the demand and supply forces of the foreign currency. Here let the home currency is the rupees and foreign currency is the dollar. And then already I told you that the exchange rate is the price of a currency or the rate at which one currency can be exchanged with another currency, right. So, the equilibrium exchange rate in a particular time period is determined by the demand and supply of the foreign currency in that particular economy, in that particular system. So, when it increases, when it decreases. So, if the demand for the currency increases, when the value of the currency decreases, then that is basically will lead to a downward sloping demand curve. And supply of currency increases and this value of the currency increases, which basically going towards the upward sloping the supply curve. If you see here, for example, demand, this it was 65, the demand was this. Whenever it was let 68, the demand was this, demand has gone down. What demand for what? The demand for the dollar, because the dollar value is depreciating. So, then go on, if you go by the 70, then again further the quantity of dollar available in the system further go down. So, because of that there is a downward sloping demand curve, and the supply obviously that is again you can say that the price and demand relationship you can observe. So, the supply basically of will increase whenever the value of the particular currency is increasing. In that particular context, the value is increasing, they are ready to provide more supply, because the particular values they can convert or they can get more money by conversion of that particular currency with respect to that particular currency, other currency. So, that is the way the demand and supply is determined, and the equilibrium can be established wherever the demand and supply is intersecting to each other. So, that is the equilibrium exchange rate, which basically we can determine in the economic system. So, that is the way the exchange rate is determined in the financial market. But the question here is, that means there are what factors determine this exchange rate? Obviously, the factors which are affecting the demand and supply of the foreign currency or demand and supply of the home currency, whatever it may be, the demand and supply factors which are affecting the currency in that particular system, that is the responsible factors which are affecting the exchange rate determination in that particular context. So, let us see what are those factors which are affecting this demand and supply of the currency. The first one is the relative inflation rate. You remember, it is relative inflation rate. We do not consider the inflation rate of a particular country, we consider the inflation rate for both the countries. That is why we are using this word relative inflation rate, that you can keep in the mind. We are not telling that inflation rate in India is 5%, inflation rate in India has increased to 7%. That has no implication, no meaning whenever you are interpreting the determination of exchange rate. But if you are saying that this inflation rate in India has gone up against another particular with respect to or in comparison to the another country's inflation rate, then there is a possibility that this will have the impact on the high impact on the exchange rate. We will start the example, the inflation rate. There are two countries here we have taken, one is your India, and another one is USA. There are two currency, we have the Indian rupee and you have the dollar, US dollar. So, we have the two currencies. For example, the inflation rate in India has gone up. If inflation rate in India has gone up, then what is happening in India? Indian demand for US goods will increase, because Indian commodities will become costlier. If Indian commodities will become costlier in comparison to Indian commodities, if US commodities are cheaper, then the demand for US commodities will increase in India. If the demand for US commodities will increase in India, then the demand for dollar will increase, right. At the same time, what will happen in US? The US desire for Indian goods will go down, because Indian goods become costlier. If Indian goods become costlier, then the supply of the dollar will go down, because America will not buy these products from India, because high price. Because of the high price, they will not buy. If they will not buy the Indian commodities, then what is happening? Obviously, there will be no flow from US to India, and that flow is basically nothing but the supply side of the dollar. So, therefore, high inflation rate in the Indian system will increase the demand for the dollar, and it will decline the supply of the dollar. So, because of that, this is your original demand curve, this is your original supply curve. Now, what is happening? Because of change in the inflation rate, the demand has gone up and the supply has gone down. So, then this was the original equilibrium where it was E0. Now, this has become here, basically it has become E1. So, the exchange rate has gone up, exchange rate has gone up in this particular, it was E0, then it has become E1. This is the way for dollar, basically the demand is more, but supply is not there. So, if the demand is there, supply is not there, then foreign currency will appreciate, but the home currency will depreciate. So, here the exchange rate, if you talk about, we are talking about from the foreign countries or foreign currencies perspective. So, here you can observe that there is a increase in the exchange rate of that particular foreign currency with respect to the home currency. Then we can see that what are those other factors. One is, you can say, that is basically your inflation rate. Then another major factor we have, that is interest rate. Then how the interest rate is affecting the exchange rate. Let the Indian interest rate, hypothetically, you have two countries already we have taken, then India's interest rate has gone up. If India's interest rate will go up, then what will happen? The Indian demand for US bank deposits will go down. Why? Because India is giving more interest. If Indian banks are giving more interest, then the demand for US bank, who are the people who want to deposit the money in the US bank, they may not be depositing the money in the US bank, they want to deposit the money in the Indian bank. So, that is why the Indian demand for US bank deposits will go down. So, therefore, the demand for dollar will go down. If the demand for dollar will go down, but at the same time, what is happening? The US desire for Indian bank deposits will go up, because in India they are getting more interest. You see, we are taking a very simplistic example, simplistic cases. The cases may be complex, but you can keep in the mind these are the fundamentals which are basically affecting the exchange rate determination. You can put lot of conditions, you can put lot of hypothetical situations through which that particular relationship may not hold good. We are not basically discussing those things here. What we are discussing, that how the change in interest rate in one country is going to affect the demand and supply of the foreign currency, and by that the exchange rate basically will be changed or will be fluctuating over the time. So, if the US desire in that particular point of time, if US desire for Indian bank deposits will go up, then the supply of the dollar will go up, because dollar will come into India, then finally the availability of the US dollar in the Indian system will go up. Then what is happening, that what will happen, then the demand for dollar will go down, but at the same time the supply is going up. Then what is going to happen? By general intuition, supply is more, demand is less, and the price will go down. So, now the exchange rate which was there E0, this has come down to E1. So, then this is the way this interest rate changes in the economic system can affect the demand and supply of the foreign currency, and once the demand and supply of the foreign currency gets changed, then the exchange rate also gets changed or gets affected by that. Then we have other factors. We can take the another factor we have, that is interest rate. Interest rate we are continuing. So, another question here, if you keep in the mind, then which interest rate? Whether we should consider real interest rate or nominal interest rate. Already all of you know that the real interest rate is nothing but the nominal interest rate minus the inflation, which we call it Fisher effect. So, a relatively high interest rate may actually reflect expectations of relatively high inflation. Generally, if you see what is the relationship between interest rate and inflation, the interest rate, if interest rate is very high, that means what we are assuming, the expected inflation also is going to be high. That means the inflation rate is high, because of that they are increasing the interest rate to decrease the money supply in the economic system, to make this price become more stable. So, that is why if there is a inflation in the system, it will discourage the foreign investment. So, obviously, the demand for dollar and supply of the dollar will get affected, and here we are telling that the demand for US citizens towards the Indian bank deposits will go up, because of the supply of dollar will go up. But if there is high inflation in the economic system, then what is going to happen? The real rate of return what they are going to generate from the market, that may not be realized. If the real rates are not realized, then what will happen? This will basically discourage the foreign investors. If it will discourage the foreign investors, then what basically will happen, that may change this dynamics of the demand and supply of the particular foreign currency. So, whenever we are going to incorporate or we are going to analyze the concept of interest rate as the determinants of exchange rate, we generally consider the real exchange rate, we do not consider the nominal exchange rate. Therefore, always consider the real interest rates which adjust the nominal interest rate for inflation. That already you know that the real exchange rate, real interest rate is nothing but the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. That actually always you keep in the mind, unless it may have some different kind of dynamics while they will play while determining the interest rate in the system. Then another factor we have, that is relative income level. If the level of income in India will go up, if you assume the level of income in Indian system has gone up, if the level of income will go up, then what will happen? Now Indian people have more money, right. So, if Indian people have more money, they want branded products, more luxury products, more comfort products, better technological products. In that context, we feel that US technology is better, US products are better because it is imported from US. So, in that context, what is happening? That the Indian demand for US goods will increase because people can afford. Their taste and preferences will change. If the taste and preference will change, then what is happening? The US demand for Indian demand for US goods will increase. Then what is happening? The demand for a dollar will increase. But that will have no impact on the supply, because anyway the supply side factor, because Indian income, they can demand more US products, that is why the demand for a dollar will go up. But there is no such theoretical logic we can establish between the income with the supply of the dollar. Income of increase in the income of the home country will have not much impact or will have no impact on the supply of the dollar in that particular home country. So, the supply curve will remain same as usual. Now, the demand curve has shifted towards the right, because the Indian demand for US goods have increased because the people's taste and preference, they want the foreign flavor from that. Because of that, what is going to happen? That the demand for a dollar will go up. So, if the demand for a dollar will go up, then what if you observe here, it was the original equilibrium point, now it has moved into this. So, the exchange rate has gone up. That means what? The Indian rupee has been depreciating or has depreciated, and the foreign currency has been appreciated. So, that is the logic what basically you can get whenever you are saying that there is a relative income level of Indian economy has gone up. So, that is another factor. Then we have some more factors also that already you know, that one most important factor is trade barriers. We have different kind of tariffs, you have the quotas, you have import duties. Those factors also contribute significantly the current account balance of the economic system. If the current account balance, which talks about the export and import, that gets highly affected whenever the trade barriers will increase. If the trade barriers will be more, or we have lot of import duties. If government of India will put lot of import duties on other countries' products, then what is going to happen? The demand for those commodities will go down, because that will become costlier. then obviously if the demand for those commodities will go down, then the demand for foreign currency in the home country will go down. So, that will have the impact on the trade and as well as the exchange rate. So, that is why the trade barriers is one of the important factors. We have the another factor, we have the foreign exchange market intervention by the regulator. Sometimes what happens, because of some reason, if there is some kind of fluctuations, high fluctuations are observed in terms of the exchange rate fluctuations in the foreign exchange market, then the central bank or Reserve Bank of India can intervene into that. To control that, they can take on the basis of the requirement, they take whatever possible measures they can take, depending upon whether they want to increase the foreign currency or they want to decrease the foreign currency. Depending upon that, the policy basically they change, and that will have the impact on the demand and supply, and once the demand and supply gets affected, then automatically the exchange rate gets affected. Then we have another factor, the expectations of the market participants, and here you see major factor is the news impact. Any news which comes to the market which is related to the foreign exchange, that will have lot of implications on the fluctuations of the exchange rate, because the news are basically coming to the market randomly. Already you know that the news can be positive news, news can be also can be negative news, and all of you know that there is an asymmetry always happens in the market, because negative news have more impact than the positive news. But whether it is negative or positive, that is going to affect the demand and supply of the foreign currency, and accordingly what is going to happen, or any policy measure government has announced something which may be conducive for the exporters or may not be conducive for the exporters. So, then what is happening, their expectations may change. If the expectations level may change, then automatically what is going to happen, that will have the impact on the demand and supply of the foreign currency, finally the exchange rate. And institutional investors often take currency positions based on the anticipated interest rate movements in the various countries. They from the beginning, depending upon certain other fundamentals, they look at that how this interest rate in that particular economy is going to be changed. Accordingly, they take their positions, and that will also have impact on the demand and supply that already we have discussed. Then we have there are three types of exchange rate system, that what we have just now discussed. We have discussed about the mostly the floating exchange rate system, which is market determined system. We have a fixed exchange rate, where the exchange rates are basically always fixed by the government, by the regulator, and they follow a particular range, and the interest rate only or the exchange rate can move only into that. And basically the country like China and other countries, they follow this fixed exchange rate system, where the exchange rate is not market determined, the exchange rate is determined or fixed by the government. Then we have another kind of exchange rate, that is called the floating exchange rate, pure floating exchange rate. There all those factors whatever we have discussed, or any factor which affect the exchange rate or demand and supply of the currency, that basically will decide that how much exchange rate will be there with respect to that foreign currency. That is purely market driven. But another one is managed exchange rate, or sometimes it is called the DATI, float exchange rate system. What is that? Here the market basically is responsible for determination of exchange rate, but if there is any requirement, then government can intervene into that to control that. So, in Indian context we have a managed exchange rate system, because generally our exchange rates are market determined, but if there is any kind of situation arises, then the Reserve Bank of India or the government can intervene into that to make this particular market stable or to control this high fluctuations of the foreign exchange in that particular system. So, this is the way the exchange rate systems are defined in this particular foreign exchange market. So, this is about the determination of the foreign exchange. and the factors which are affecting the foreign exchange and the foreign exchange rate system. Further, we will be discussing about the foreign exchange market, how the central banks intervene into that, and some issues related to the foreign exchange reserves and the FDI and FII kind of issues, which are playing a significant role on the development of the foreign exchange market across the countries. So, for this you can go through these references. Thank you.